My name is Caleb Morgan, and what I'm about to tell you isn't a simple family dispute. It's a lesson carved into my life. Imagine finding out the people who raised you built their dreams on your name, your credit, your silence. That's what happened to me. One morning, the parents who taught me loyalty drained my bank line for an $86,000 wedding. Not for me, but for the son they adopted and called their golden child. That's where everything started to unravel. Before we dive in, take a second to subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support turns these real-life stories into something that reaches thousands of people every week. I used to believe family meant safety. Work hard, stay quiet, pay the bills, and you'd earn love. That illusion cracked the day Elaine and Richard Morgan used my name to fund Adrian's wedding. When I questioned it, they called me ungrateful. They told me to pack my things, that I owed them for being raised at all. So I stayed silent. Let them plan the guest list, smiled at the invitations, and then on the big day, I simply disappeared. That was the spark, but the fire had been waiting for years. It was a Friday morning in River Bend, one of those still, heavy air days when the heat settles like a wet blanket. The sun had barely cracked the sky when I was out in the yard, pushing my old mower across the thin grass. Just the steady hum of blades and a dog barking down the block. No chaos, no drama. That's how I liked my life. Predictable, small, quiet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen, Mom, stopped me. Something in my gut said, "Answer." "Hi, sweetheart," she cooed. Too sweet. That voice was a signal I'd learned to recognize. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, nothing serious," she replied with a soft laugh. "Just a little banking mix-up. These banks, honestly. Could we use your bank card for a couple of days to cover an emergency? We'll pay it right back." I let go of the mower handle and tightened my grip on the phone. "What kind of emergency?" "Nothing dramatic," she rushed. "Just a deposit we couldn't delay. We didn't want to bother you. You've always been responsible, Caleb. Blood means obligation, right?" That phrase. Always that phrase. I stared at the quiet street, knowing I should say no, but she kept softening her tone, calling me dependable, reminding me I was the good son. "Just a few days?" I asked, already hearing the lie in my own voice. "Promise," she said. "Thank you, sweetheart. We love you." I hung up and went back to mowing, but my stomach felt like I'd just handed over something much bigger than plastic. That night at my kitchen table, I stared at the bank card in my wallet. Still mine, but it didn't feel like it anymore. I grew up quietly, unnoticed, steady as wallpaper. Then Adrian arrived. 8 years old, foster kid, labeled fragile. My parents said he needed space, therapy, and patience. He cried, lashed out, and they poured gifts on him. The big room, tutors, vacations. Me? I was silent. Once when I asked why, Elaine simply said, "He's been through more. Honey, you wouldn't understand." But I did. I learned early that in our house, pain earned privilege and quiet earned nothing. 12 days slipped by. Work is blurred. I forgot about the bank card until one afternoon my phone rang. "Mr. Morgan, this is Rachel Kim from Crestline Bank. We're confirming an $86,000 charge made last week on your account." My stomach dropped. "I think you've got the wrong person." "No, sir," she said. "It's a deposit for an event at Ocean View Terrace." I thanked her, barely able to form words, and hung up. I called my mother, no answer. Called again. On the third try, she picked up. "Oh, hi, Caleb. Did you use my bank card for a wedding deposit?" Silence. Then a sigh. "Yes, but we meant to tell you. Things just got busy." "For Adrian's wedding?" "Yes. He and Lily Carter fell in love so quickly, and this venue is so special, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "Why didn't you ask me?" "We did," she replied smoothly. "You said yes. Don't be dramatic." I stayed quiet, listening to her fill the silence. "You weren't using it, and honestly, this is important for our family, for Adrian." Our family. Like I wasn't even part of it. That night I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the old desk lamp casting slow shadows across the ceiling. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant, that my boundaries were invisible. Maybe I had trained them to believe I didn't have any. One quiet yes at a time. I rose before the sun, brewed coffee, sat in the quiet, running that call through my head like a warped cassette, not because of the dollars, but because they looked me in the eye and told me my silence was consent. By 9:10 a.m. I was on the road to the old house. Not to fight, I told myself, just to get clarity, a real conversation. I deserved at least that much. Inside, I could already smell fresh-baked scones. The planning was in full swing. The smell of fresh-baked scones filled the kitchen when I stepped inside. Elaine Morgan stood at the island, pen in one hand, flipping through flower catalogs as if nothing had happened yesterday. Richard hunched over the table, scanning a stack of guest names. "You're up early, Caleb," Elaine said lightly, as though we hadn't argued about stolen money. "We're leaning toward peonies, maybe blush roses." Richard barely glanced up. "Morning." I stayed at the doorway. "We need to talk." Elaine waved me off with a smile. "Coffee first. You always think better after caffeine." "I'm not here for coffee. That money wasn't yours." Her expression never changed. "Caleb, we raised you better than to be so selfish. You knew this mattered." "Selfish?" My voice wavered. "Yes. Adrian has no one else. You have a job, your own place. He's starting a family. You should be happy for him." "I am," I said through clenched teeth. "But not at my expense." Richard sighed, resting his palms on the table. "Don't make a scene. You're exaggerating." "No," I shot back. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." The front door opened before more could be said. Adrian walked in, followed by Sophia Lane, her arms full of binders and fabric swatches. She beamed. "Hi, everyone." Elaine's face lit up as she rushed to embrace Sophia like a daughter. "Look at you two, so perfect together." Adrian gave me a curt nod, no smile, no hello, and sat down. They spread out menus and timelines while I dragged a chair to the edge of the table, uninvited. Dinner that night buzzed louder than usual. Forks clinking, false laughter, Elaine's famous meatloaf nobody liked but everyone pretended to enjoy. My plate stayed nearly full. Richard rose with a glass of wine. "A toast," he said proudly, "to the son who brought light into this family. Adrian, you've made us proud." The word proud landed like a slap. No one looked my way. I remembered another night, my high school graduation. I'd worked nights, clawed my way to grades nobody expected. When I crossed that stage, the program misspelled my name, Caleb Moran. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and said nothing. That was my childhood. Close enough. Never enough. I set my fork down. "Do you even remember what college I went to?" Silence. Elaine blinked. Sophia tilted her head. "Wasn't it community college?" Elaine cut in quickly. "College isn't everything. Look where Adrian is now." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, look at him." The table fell quiet. I pushed back my chair. "Thanks for dinner." No one stopped me as I left. I drove home with the radio off, windows cracked. The city lights blurred, billboards, traffic signals, Strachen, and Jur's living lives untouched by mine. Back at my row house, I dropped my keys, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank portal. My stomach turned. It wasn't just the deposit. There were charges for florists, formal wear hire, caterers, invitations, even a private tasting dinner. Every detail of their perfect wedding was paid for with my card. No permission, no warning, just taken. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking why and started adding up the years. Years of being the invisible son, nodding quietly while my space, my voice, my place were handed away. 12 days passed. I worked, answered emails, patched server issues at NextCore Labs like nothing had changed. But inside, something had shifted. That Thursday, Rachel Kim leaned over our cubicle wall. "You look like someone just watched a puppy get kicked. You okay?" I forced a half smile. "Just a lot going on." "Family drama?" she guessed. "Something like that." She tilted her head. "Want to grab coffee after shift? I've got a gift card burning a hole in my wallet." Normally I'd decline, but I nodded. We sat in a quiet corner of the cafe. The air smelled of burnt espresso and sugar. I wrapped my hands around a paper cup, though the coffee was cold. After a long silence, I asked, "If your family used your card for something huge, life-changing huge, without telling you, what would you do?" Rachel leaned back. "How huge?" "A huge wedding." Her jaw dropped. "Yours?" "No, my brother's." "Wait, they used your card for his wedding?" "Yeah. 86,000. Rachel exhaled sharply. "That's not family. That's theft, wrapped in love." The words cut through me sharper than she knew. I laughed weakly, but the phrase stayed with me long after we left. Later that night, I pulled down an old cardboard box from my closet. Inside were scraps of childhood, faded photos, bent report cards, forgotten notes. I picked up one picture. Adrian, grinning on a beach, sand stuck to his shoulders. And I wondered how long I'd been nothing more than the background of his story. I wasn't in the photo. I hadn't even been on that trip. That summer, they told me they needed space, a bonding getaway for Adrian to heal. I was 14. The picture sent me spiraling through memories. Age 12. I split my chin on the sidewalk, needed 6 stitches, and sat in the ER for 2 hours alone while Elaine sat at Adrian's therapy session. Age 16. My birthday slipped by unnoticed. The next day she brought home a grocery store cake. His name, not mine, scrawled across the frosting. She shrugged. They mixed up the order. Age 28. During the mortgage crash, I wrote a check to save the house. Richard promised to pay me back. He never did. He never even said thank you. I set the photo down. "They never picked me," I whispered. The sound of my own voice startled me. Back at my desk, I opened a locked file on my laptop labeled Red Ledger. It wasn't fancy, just rows of dates, amounts, and notes I'd been keeping for years. At first, it was a joke, little IOUs they'd forgotten, gas money, phone bills, dinners I'd covered. But the list grew heavier as time passed. Taught in 16, paid for Adrian's rehab, $1,200, 2017, bought Dad's hearing aids, $2,100, 2019, replaced Mom's broken AC, $3,800, 2022, covered my nephew's tuition when Adrian couldn't swing it, $2,900, and now, 2024, Adrian's wedding, unauthorized, $86,000. In the notes column I typed, "Not family, just an obligation." Then I deleted it, wrote instead, "They'll never admit what they've taken, but I see it." Something shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was awake. I printed every line. 40 pages, single-spaced. Cold facts. Not to shame them, but to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. That the weight I carried came from years of erosion, one quiet cut at a time. 3 days later, I walked into their house with the folder. The sky was clear, birds loud, the world didn't notice that something permanent was about to break inside that dining room. Elaine opened the door, smiling like I'd come to mow the lawn. "Well, look who dropped by. Want some iced tea, baby?" I brushed past her, dropped the pages on the table. Richard looked up from his chair. "What's all this?" "This isn't an argument," I said evenly. "It's a record. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to show you what I've survived." Elaine laughed nervously. "Survived? Caleb, honey, you sound dramatic." "I'm fine," I said. "That's why I printed it." Richard slid on his glasses, skimmed a few pages, shook his head. Everyone remembers things differently. You've always been sensitive. They're not memories, I told him. They're records. Elaine crossed her arms. This is ridiculous. You're just reopening wounds. No, I said quietly. I'm showing you the cuts I've been bleeding from for years, while you were patching Adrian's ego. Her smile collapsed. She clutched her bronze pendant, blinking fast. Richard muttered about stress and family pressure. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just watched them reject proof that had their fingerprints all over it. That night my phone buzzed. Adrian, got a minute, man to man? Against my better judgment, I said yes. We met at a low-lit bar off Pine Hill Avenue, the kind where nobody asked questions. He strolled in wearing a blazer, no tie, hair slicked, looking like a walking motivational seminar. Thanks for coming, he said, clapping my shoulder like we were teammates. He ordered beers, launched into wedding stress, how Mom and Dad didn't always handle things right. Then he leaned closer. I know you've carried more than your share. It's not lost on me. I studied with him. Was this honesty? Or another performance? I want you involved, he said smoothly. Not just in the wedding. What comes after? I frowned. What's after? He smiled. Business, real estate, a boutique firm, small but sharp. Investors love the family story. And the firm, already filed, named Stanton Cody, has weight, right? My stomach tightened. What's that got to do with me? He leaned in, lowered his voice. It's under your name, technically, just paperwork. We'll fix it later, but right now, it gives us credibility. I blinked. You used my name? His grin curled wider, casual, practiced. Come on, Caleb, it's family. I didn't yell, I didn't throw my drink. I just stood, the weight of 40 pages pressing against my jacket, and walked out. My name was never theirs to use, but now I had to claw it back. Taking it back didn't feel heroic. It felt like dragging myself from quicksand I hadn't realized I was sinking in. The next morning I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, staring at a single sheet of paper. Not the ledger, this was cleaner, sharper. A cease and desist letter drafted by Julia Grant, a no-nonsense lawyer I'd hired. He used your name for financial gain without permission, she had said in her steady, matter-of-fact voice. That's identity fraud, Caleb. She wasn't angry, just delivering the truth like a weather report before a storm. I didn't want to go nuclear. Not yet. I told her I'd deliver the letter myself. At Adrian's row house, the place looked exactly like you'd expect from someone living on borrowed sacrifices. Polished hardwood, framed prints chosen by catalog, not taste. Lily Carter opened the door, blinking at me like she didn't know who I was. Just make sure he reads it, I said, handing her the tan legal folder. No scene, no yelling, just boundaries, the kind they always treated as insults. Then I turned and walked away. The following morning, I buried myself in a network audit at NextCore Labs, trying to lose myself in the numbers. At 10:30 a.m., I heard my name echo through the atrium. Caleb, are you hiding now? That's what you are, a coward. I rose slowly, heart sinking. Richard M. Organ stood in the lobby, red-faced, fists clenched, voice booming like he still owned the room. Clients froze mid-conversation. My co-workers stared. You dare send lawyers after your own blood? He thundered. After everything we gave you? I stayed silent. You were nothing without us. Schooled, housed, fed. And this is how you repay us? With legal threats? He stepped closer, his fury spilling. Think you're better than us because you've got your little records? You've always been too sensitive. I locked eyes with him, calm, unshaken. You didn't raise me, I said. You used me as armor. Security arrived, ushering him toward the door as he fought against their grip. You'll regret this, Caleb. You've made enemies of your own blood. The doors shut. The lobby fell into whispers. Inside, I didn't feel pride or relief, just a flicker of space, like air seeping into a room that had always been sealed tight. That night, I drove back to the house, not to argue, but to finish something. I parked down the street, walked up the same cracked sidewalk I'd known since childhood. The porch creaked under my weight. In my palm, the brass house key I'd used since 13. Cold, heavier than metal should be. Through the window, I saw Elaine humming over the stove, Adrian laughing with Sophia Lane on the couch. The picture-perfect family, untouched, as though my existence had never bent their world at all. I wanted to pound the glass and scream, I was here too. Instead, I bent down, placed the key carefully on the welcome mat, straightened it so it lined perfectly with the door. "This house never had a room for me," I whispered. "I just didn't want to see it." Then I turned, walking away. Not their son anymore, but not yet sure who I was without that weight. Days passed, silence. No calls, no surprise visits, no guilt-laced voicemails. For the first time, stillness filled my life. It felt unnatural, like waiting for aftershocks when the quake had already torn the walls apart. I returned to my routines, coffee, emails, dishes, telling myself maybe it was done. Then came the knock. Soft, not frantic, just enough to cut through the quiet. When I opened the door, no one stood there. Only a white envelope on the floor, my name printed clean across the front. No return address. At the counter, I tore it open, bracing for some petty jab. But it wasn't a note. It was a notice from Eastern Legal Associates, the same firm my parents used for estate planning. They were threatening me, accusing me of emotional defamation, slander, and reputational harm. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth would crack. They had drained me, humiliated me, erased me, and now I was the abuser? It wasn't a real lawsuit. Any lawyer could see that. It was intimidation, dressed up in legal polish, just enough to make me hesitate. And it worked. That night I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop pacing the apartment like a restless ghost. Sometime near 2:45 a.m., I collapsed on the couch. That's when the dream came. I was 14 again. Adrian had stolen the car, drunk, swerving into a mailbox, denting the bumper. But this time, in the dream, I was the one blamed. We were both sitting in the car that night when the cops pulled up, but I was the one who stepped forward. I told them I'd been driving, freshman year, no permit, just me, shivering in the dark, lying to shield the family. Richard Morgan never corrected the report, never said thank you either. He just let me take the blame. I woke up gasping, like the dream had stolen the air out of my chest, and in that panic came the clearest truth of my life. They had been weaponizing my silence since before I even knew how to speak. They called it love, they called it loyalty, but silence was their blade, and I was the one who kept it sharp for them. Work the next morning felt like walking underwater. My body typed, answered calls, nodded at coworkers, but my mind kept drifting, back to the flashlight glare, the dented mailbox. Every moment I'd swallowed the words I should have said. At my desk, I scrolled through old texts and voicemails. Threads I should have deleted long ago, but hadn't. Proof, I told myself. Evidence that maybe someone, someday, would see. One by one, I started erasing them. Birthday messages that sounded like duty. Requests for help dressed as compliments. Apologies for never actually saying sorry. But I stopped at one voicemail. 2 years old. Elaine Morgan's voice, soft and syrupy. "You're the only one we trust, Caleb." Back then, I'd played it over and over, thinking it meant I mattered. Now, all I heard was leverage. Not love, not trust, control. I listened again, then again. And somewhere between the second and third replay, anger settled in. Not explosive, not wild, just heavy, steady, deep. "You didn't trust me," I whispered into the empty room. "You depended on me. That's not love. That's ownership." And I pressed save, not as a memory, but as proof of the difference. After that night, I stopped waiting for their next move. The silence had said enough. I decided to answer, not with words, but with action. The next morning, I drove past the office and headed straight downtown to the land title office. No warning, no call, just a decision. The building was nothing special. Government beige, a place most people walked past without realizing it held the bones of lives. Deeds, marriages, lawsuits, companies. I handed over my ID and asked for every filing under Stanton Company linked to my name. 20 minutes later, I walked out with a file that felt heavier than stone. There it was, a company registered under my full name, my social life, my address, even a rented suite tied back to Adrian Morgan's condo complex. He hadn't just borrowed my name. He'd built a business with it, used my credit history to charm investors, constructed legitimacy out of my silence. This wasn't just theft anymore, it was fraud on a federal scale. I didn't call him, didn't drive over to shout. That never worked. This time I gathered every page, every signature, every forged line and sealed it in a packet. At a Courier Express drop box near the freeway, I slid it inside with the anonymous fraud report form clipped to the front. Thanks. Gone. On the way back, I parked behind a laundromat, opened my laptop on a hotspot, and created a burner email. 3 uploads, 3 different sites, the kind that specialized in exposing white-collar scams and family court corruption. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. That night I didn't sleep, but for once I wasn't worn out either. By dawn I was at the neighborhood cafe. Back booth, plain coffee, nothing in it. I pulled out a worn brown journal and wrote, not plans, not numbers. Truth. Every year, every lie, every favor that became an order, every sacrifice tossed aside with a hollow smile. And at the bottom, I wrote 3 lines. You are not broken. You were betrayed, and you survived. I stared at the words until they no longer felt foreign, until for the first time, I actually believed them. That afternoon, I met with Julia Grant again. No small talk, no hesitation, just preparation. Do you want civil charges? She asked. Not yet. Do you want to notify Adrian directly? No. This wasn't revenge. This was a reclamation, taking back the ground they had built their kingdom on, brick by brick, using my silence. Walking out of her office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize the man staring back. Older, sharper, stripped of excuses. Storms don't say sorry, I muttered, and neither do I. Because like a storm, they wouldn't see me coming until everything started to break. April 18th. I woke before the alarm. No panic, no fear, just stillness, the kind people mistake for peace when it's really the eye of the storm. And I knew then, the reckoning had only just begun. The morning light slipped through the blinds when I picked up my phone. 2 unread texts. Adrian Morgan. Thanks for stepping up, bro. Means everything. Elaine Morgan. You'll see. This is what family does. We cover for ourselves. I stared at the screen. No reply. Just silence. Coffee, slow pour, steady hands. I wasn't rushing. For once, time felt like it belonged to me. At 9:10 a.m., I opened my contacts and erased every number tied to my last name. Tap, tap, gone. By 9:30, I was at the post office with a tan legal folder. Inside, notarized affidavits revoking every co-signature, voiding power of attorney, and a formal declaration of estrangement. The clerk didn't ask, just weighed it, stamped it, and slid it into the tray. Walking out, I felt lighter than I had in years. By late morning, the Watchdog blog went live. Short, sharp. Sources confirm the National Revenue Bureau has opened a preliminary review into tax discrepancies tied to Stanton Co., a private LLC registered under the identity of an uninvolved party. No names yet, but the wedding crowd would connect the dots. The ceremony began at noon. White chairs, Flower arches, violin strings, paid for with my credit history. But I wasn't there. I was 3 miles away in a quiet cafe, corner booth, watching the stream on my laptop. At 12:15, someone handed Elaine an envelope with my handwriting. To whoever still calls me ungrateful. Inside, years of transfers, screenshots of quick pay and transfer now logs, the IRS complaint, and a single note. I was quiet, not blind. I didn't need to see her reaction. The silence told me enough. By 12:30, whispers spread across the rows. The pianist stumbled. Adrian vanished behind the floral arch, Fauban, pressed tight to his ear. Guests followed one by one, until by 1:00 the celebration lounge was half empty. And me? I just sipped my coffee, not smiling, not gloating, just still. I pulled a napkin from the dispenser and folded it slowly into a paper star, something Elaine once taught me as a child, calling me her quiet maker of beautiful things. For years, I mistook that for love. I left the folded star on the table, paid cash, and walked out without looking back. That was the last day I answered them. 10 weeks passed. No texts, no knocks, no apologies, just absence. And that silence taught me more than their words ever had. I had never been their son. I'd been a tool, a cover, a shield. And when shields break, you replace them. One morning, I sat on a bench at Millstone Park. Cool breeze, branches swaying like they had nothing to hide. I opened my worn brown journal and turned to an old page. Good boys, sacrifice. That's love. Elaine had told me that once when I gave up my birthday money so Adrian could attend summer camp. She hugged me, called me a good boy. I drew a line through it, firm, final. Beneath it, I wrote, "Good boys don't bleed for liars." The next day, I filed the paperwork at District Hall. Name change, legal, binding, permanent. Not to erase my past, but to reclaim myself from it. When I stepped back into the sunlight, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't even feel free. I just felt steady. The ground no longer shifted beneath me. A week later, sitting across from my therapist, I said it out loud for the first time. My silence doesn't belong to them anymore. She asked me quietly, "What feels the hardest now?" For once, I didn't dodge. Knowing I did everything right, I said. And it still wasn't enough for them. The words lingered between us, heavy, but not crushing. Then I added, softer this time. But it's finally enough for me.